Hello， 大家好，欢迎回到外媒看中国，我是安博然。Washington has enforced a number of illegal unilateral sanctions against China's Xinjiang region since 2021, which, among other things, subvert the internationally recognized idea of innocent until proven guilty, assuming that any and all goods produced in Xinjiang or even partly produced in Xinjiang are tainted with so-called slave labor, forcing accused entities to prove they are innocent, which is all but impossible. Finally, though, someone is speaking up for China. That person is Professor Alena Douhan from the UN, who recently visited Xinjiang and is now calling on the US to immediately remove its illegal sanctions. Will it work? And how has the Western media reported on the UN's statements? Today we'll investigate. This is Reports on China. I'm Andy Boreham in Shanghai. Let's get reporting. In 2020, ASPI, or the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, issued a report claiming to have uncovered the widespread use of Uyghur slave labour in Chinese factories. The report, Uyghurs for Sale, went on to gain huge traction in media and government circles, ultimately leading to the popular belief that Xinjiang's Uyghur people are forced to work against their will. This had huge ramifications, including but not limited to the US announcing a boycott of any and all products produced in Xinjiang. That came in 2021 when Washington enacted the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which flipped internationally recognized legal concepts 180 degrees, accusing anyone and everyone who produces goods in Xinjiang of utilizing forced labor and banning their import into the United States. Instead of presuming innocence until guilt is proven, Washington requires to this day that anyone who wants to be removed from the sanctions list prove a negative, that they are not employing slave labor. Of course, the process is literally impossible, and some companies have wasted years in US courts trying to prove their innocence. But there is starting to be some light at the end of the tunnel. Recently, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Unilateral Coercive Measures and Human Rights, Professor Alena Douhan, made an official 12-day visit to China to investigate Washington's unilateral sanctions. While here, she spent most of her time in the Xinjiang region and met with representatives from national and local government institutions, non-governmental organizations, associations, humanitarian actors, businesses, UN entities, academia, businesses, as well as the diplomatic community, according to the UN. The professor has already released her preliminary findings, ultimately labeling Washington's sanctions against China as illegal and demanding that they be removed. In her report, she stated that Xinjiang has been particularly affected, with a massive number of Uyghurs losing their jobs and their livelihoods. She said that these illegal sanctions undoubtedly affect the human rights and lives of the general population, and noted enterprises employing thousands of people, which were forced to undergo, in a short period of time, significant cuts in their workforce, in some cases of more than 50%, and small and medium enterprises going bankrupt. Washington and the Australian Strategic Policy Institute's claims that Xinjiang is rife with slave labour have been debunked on multiple occasions. Viewers of this channel will of course recall Australian legal analyst Jack James and her numerous reports calling for justice for the people of Xinjiang in the face of such blatant oppression brought about by ASPI and their malicious reports. Jack debunked the majority of ASPI's Xinjiang reports from a legalistic standpoint and took special care to debunk their claims of Uyghur slave labour, concluding that the ASPI slave labour report was not a work of scholarly analysis, but rather a piece of strategic disinformation to exact harm. Her 78-page rebuttal proved that not a single one of ASPI's 18 slave labour accusations stood up to scrutiny, and that the report purposefully and maliciously smears China as a human rights abuser, with the ultimate result being that it was actually the Australian think tank that has infringed on the human rights of the Uyghur people, namely their right to work and their right to access work training programs and possibly other human rights. The UN's Special Rapporteur concluded in her preliminary findings that Washington's sanctions are illegal and that they should be removed. I call, therefore, on sanctioning parties to lift and suspend all unilateral sanctions applied to China, Chinese nationals, and companies without authorization of the UN Security Council, and the use of which cannot be justified as normal business activity in the form of retortions or countermeasures in accordance with international law. No good intentions or references to the need to protect national, foreign, economic, or technology interests can be used as grounds for or justification of unilateral sanctions, as contrary to international law and ultimately resulting in human rights violations. So will Washington listen? Well, I sincerely doubt it. The US and the Western world in general, including its lackeys like Japan and South Korea, are completely out of touch with the vast majority of the world today. And they seem almost embarrassingly willing to keep going against the grain to push for the continued and fast dissolving rule of Western hegemony. Just check out this map of the countries in green who have recognized Palestinian statehood. That's nearly 90% of the world's population. And the countries in grey who do not recognize Palestine make up the West and its lackeys. Embarrassing. Right, before I let you go, let's quickly check out how the Western media is reporting on the UN's recent visit to China and its calls for Washington to remove its illegal sanctions against Xinjiang and the Uyghur people. Searching on Google under the News tab using Alena Douhan's name reveals exactly 0 reports by Western mainstream media. 0. So if you still thought Western media and government objectives weren't intrinsically tied together, think again. And on that note, that will be it for today, you guys. But as always, I'd love to know your thoughts, so do let me know down below. Also, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help the channel. I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.